right. Andrea Gribble, thanks for joining us here on Ambitious, the MBIT podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you again. So we're doing a little bit of a home and home here where we joined you on your podcast and got to talk about school public relations and social media programs. And I wanted to have you on our podcast to talk a little bit about how schools can, especially schools like mine, career technical centers, can grow their social media presence and tell their story. And I think storytelling is super important. So I really, really, really appreciate you coming on. If it's all right, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and experience in advocating for school social media use?
Yeah, well, I'm a chemistry major in college, so it's perfectly makes sense that I'm in a social media business now. I was in corporate America for 13 and a half years and kind of worked my way up and got laid off. I lost my job. I was a single mom with 2 little girls, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I started doing social media for businesses. And the superintendent at my school, he also went to my church, and he was my mom's boss. So my mom was the district administrative secretary for 37 years.
Wow.
Before she just recently retired. But she was talking and saying, hey, Andrea lost her job, and now she's doing social media. So Brian Henning said, he was a superintendent. He said, oh, maybe Andrea can help us with social media at our school. I didn't even know, coming from a super small school of 300 kids, I didn't even know like school communication was like a career. I had no idea, but I knew that we had great things happening in our small little district that deserved to be celebrated on social media. And that's how I got my start. And actually ended up finding this niche of helping schools celebrate what's happening. I knew nothing when I started. I made every mistake and still continue to make mistakes because you will, because I mean, it's social media and you're putting yourself out there. But I've been at this now for 10 years. I still manage the social media for that small little school district that I started.
Do you really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Just today I'm posting about playgroup, and we got a spaghetti feed coming up, and, you know, all of the things. And so we've really built a system where I'm not at the school, but I can celebrate what's happening. And my business now, Social School for EDU, we partner with 85 school districts across the country where we manage their social media for them. And then we have an awesome, thriving membership group that Janice is part of that really provides resources for schools that are telling their own story. And there's over 400 schools that are part of that program.
Wow. So first off, easy follow. I definitely have to, I didn't realize you were still the active poster for the district. So easy follow. Yes. I'll have to hop on there and do that. But we found you through the online space, right? And we've talked about our connection with Dr. Joe Sanfilippo, and he talks about the work that you've done and telling their story. And so we found you when I took this position here at Middle Bucks. It was important for me to make sure we were telling our story. And I said, I don't know if you know this or not. And you're very, very modest, but you also are the author of Social Media for Schools. And so this was one of the first purchases that I made for our PR person here, and introduced her to your work. And it was validating in a lot of ways and inspiring in a lot of ways too, because some of the things that we're doing, you talk about in here. And then there were some ideas, of course, that, we obviously can't think of everything, and you already have, so why reinvent the wheel? And so we've been using your playbooks as well. And so it's a great resource. But we found you online and have benefited from that online space. So
yeah, I just have to tell you something, Mark. I hang around really smart people like you and your school communicator, and then I just share what I've learned. So over the years, I've just continually surrounded myself with people that are doing a really good job with recognizing and shining a light on what's happening in the classroom, out of the classroom, student, staff recognitions, all of that. And so that book, I've been blogging since I started this business. And so really this whole thing came together because of all of those conversations and articles and ideas that I got from schools all over. And we put them together in one book. And I'm really grateful to hear that was helpful because it wasn't easy. I was very intimidated. I'm not like a book writer. I used to sing in a rock and roll band, but I was never an author. So I'm glad that it's helpful.
Well, I think the online space now, we're finding the same consistent inspiration from the online group, and you and your team do a great job of being timely with your recommendations. You know what's going on, what time of year it is, when the holidays are coming up. And so it's a great reminder of the pace that we're trying to keep in our social media program in order to make sure that we're telling that story. I guess I'm still kind of amazed that it's 2023 and social media has been around for about 25 years at this point, that we're still having to convince people that it's a good idea or it's a necessary place to be in, because now I believe more people than ever are getting things like their news from social media, and they're getting most of their daily interaction from the social networking. Do you find that that you're having that experience, that you're still having to provide that level of support for folks that are really still hesitant to get on social media?
Well, I think there's a lot of fear, and there's a fear because it's social media is social. And so people can go on and say whatever they want. And since 2020, people are not afraid to say whatever they want. And they may not be in your community, you have any connection, but they can still go on there. So there is some of that fear, but it's all manageable. And I talk about it a lot in the book, but it's just, having commenting guidelines, setting up some parameters, being able to block fake bots and things like that. There are ways to keep your students and staff safe and safely celebrated. I always say, these kids are on social media on their personal level, and certainly at a school level, we're celebrating the great things happening, right? And I think the world needs those stories. We need to open up the walls, because a lot of people like to make up what we do. And certainly in the career and technical space, which it is almost February when we're recording this, which is CTE month. So we definitely all look at.
We're ready to go. Shirt. We just did our distribution of our Support the Trades at MBIT shirts. Okay. This is a great story, inspired by some of our recognize and acknowledgement of the great things we're doing here. So yes, it is almost February, CTE month.
Yeah. And so, we need to be able to continue to change the narrative of what's happening in our schools, of the programs that are available. And I really think we're starting to see that switch. Mark, we didn't share, but I have 6 kids. So I've got 2 daughters and I've got 4 stepsons, and 2 are still in high school, but the rest are on their way. And I don't believe a 4-year college is for everybody. And there's such tremendous opportunities with these high school programs of getting into the trades and being able to get right into the workforce with some associate's degrees and certificates and all of those things.
Amen.
So we've got parents like me that are craving to see those things, and we can use social media to really bring those programs to people that are just scrolling through. And I think it's something you're going to miss out on if you're not embracing it. And I think most schools nowadays, like you said, it's 2024. They have embraced, they know they need it, but some still want to turn the comments off, which it's like, well, then you might as well just post stuff on your website, because the algorithm, and you're not getting that positive feedback, maybe some negative feedback, but maybe it's stuff that's going to help you communicate better and solve problems. And, nobody is perfect. So I guess does that help answer that question? Of
course it does. I mean, just last year we started a TikTok for our school, and we use our different social media avenues for different purposes. We recognize that the audience is different for those different platforms. But even with TikTok, because there is some national dialogue about that. Same thing is true now with X. I mean, there was some national dialogue about X as well. So those come into because we're in the public sphere. Those conversations come up, and people ask, well, how do you protect against data on TikTok? And ultimately, it's not that we ignore the concerns. We try to build in managing those concerns in the content we produce. And then we also try to make sure that the focus is not on creating anything that is controversial, but more so that it's meant to attract the audience that that platform is there for and celebrate people that deserve to be celebrated. And so, it's being smart about the platform, but also recognizing that that's where people's eyes are. And in terms of marketing, you have to be where people's eyes and ears are. And if that's where their eyes and ears are, we feel like it's important to make sure that we're contributing to that dialogue so that we're having a voice in the space. So, I still think that there is some trepidation, and I think, as you mentioned, it's important to recognize that those concerns exist, and then make sure that you have procedures in place to manage things when they happen. I mean, I sent an email out about these shirts, and I'm really proud of these shirts, and I think that they're student designed, which is great. We're distributing these to our sending schools because they are the home schools for our students, and it's a great way for the home schools to show support of their students that have chosen a career and technical pathway here at our school. And I forgot a letter in the word shirt when I sent it off to some of our constituents. And it made a rather funny, it was a faux pas, no doubt about it. I actually was able to catch it before it made wide distribution, but it's just a mistake. We're all humans, and right. So it was not a massive issue that we couldn't get past. It was just something that I needed to adjust and get back to. And the message is still about the shirts, not what I had unintentionally sent out in that email. So we were talking about storytelling, and I guess the question is, why is storytelling? Why does the story matter? We have, we can just provide. We're in awards season. We're in competition season now, so I could just report a list of awards that our students have won. But each one of those awards, behind each one of those awards, or even non-awards, even just a competitor, there's a story behind it. So why do you think the story matters the most, and why is the storytelling so important for schools to share with the folks that are reading their content?
Well, in today's day and age, it's so hard to get people's attention. And how do you get that? You get it through entertaining, you get it through educating, you get it through emotion. And when you just say, we've got the best teachers. Okay, so does every school says that. But all of a sudden you share a story about a teacher who has built up this robotics program, where they've got kids participating on a national level, and what they did to help provide the fundraising. Or you have a student, I have a post that I just saw where a blind student is learning how to check people out of the food center at their school, and they have entered Braille on the computer. Like, that is cool. That is personalized learning. That is the school doing everything it can to make sure that child succeeds. That's the stuff that gives me goosebumps. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that relates to people. When something goes viral for a positive reason, a student gets to go in, and they aren't usually on the basketball team, and both teams make sure that they can shoot a basket. People love those types of stories because they're an individual person. It's a real person. It's authentic. There's all the feels. And now in today's day and age, when everybody's walking around with an amazing, camera and a video camera in their pocket with their phone, we can capture these things. I just recently saw a little boy who was getting out of the bus, and every night he races down the road, and everybody's yelling at him, "Go Xavier." And because the bus driver also felt like he was part of the storytelling and knew this was happening every day, he took out his phone and videotaped this little guy running down the road. The whole bus is erupting and cheering him on as he goes down. And that's the story people remember, they see, they talk about, they share. That's why stories matter. And these stories are happening every single day in our schools. We have to be willing and able to tell them, whether it's staff, like you have a staff member, but you're also involving students, students are amazing storytellers. They've grown up with social media. They get it. They know what's going to resonate. So that is the power of storytelling. And it's going to make every decision and every issue that might pop up in your school, it's going to make it easier to deal with when you are consistently giving people glimpses of what it's really like inside your school.
Wow. Well said. The video that sticks in my head the most is the student who runs off of the bus, and all day, he's been waiting all day to tell his mom just how terrible the sandwich was that she had made for him that day. Runs right off the bus and goes, "Mommy, terrible sandwich today." And, it's just one of those things where it's stuck in my head forever. And it's just a moment that was captured. And, it becomes sort of that sticky memory that, people can latch onto. So how do you teach people? How do I teach people to be better storytellers then? Or how do I help them to see those moments? Because you're right, those moments are everywhere. I walked into an electrical class today, and it's sort of I guess ironic is the right word. I was giving a tour of a new employee that we have, and we were stopping in all 21 of our programs. And we got to the electrical lab, and I said, "I want you to notice something here. I want you to notice how deeply engaged every single student is." And there were about 3 or 4 different areas of the room in which they were working. And I said, "I want you to try to identify where the teacher is right now." And at that very moment, there's a teacher on the right-hand side working with a student, and they were wiring a light switch. And quite literally, the light turned on, right? So that was a moment. That was a moment for that student who literally the light switch turned on for, but also that was clearly an individual, a personalized learning environment where that student was getting individual attention from the teacher and had the light bulb moment, if you will, about whatever they were learning. So that is absolutely a story to tell. So how do we teach people to capture those moments, to see those moments, to be better storytellers, especially folks that have not been empowered or experienced in that storytelling?
Well, you got to build the culture, and you've got to build storytellers kind of one person at a time. Now, of course, you can talk to all of your staff and really encourage them. Hey, twice a month, I want you to grab your phone and take a picture when something happens, and then send it in. We use an email address, and you probably maybe do as well, to get it to Janice and her team to be able to post. We don't personally think everybody in the entire school needs to have access to the Facebook page, the Instagram page, because you're going to lose control over spelling and grammar. I mean, just like what you talked about, we have one person that's kind of responsible for getting it out, but everybody can catch those moments. And I think the word story is often intimidating for our educators. Oh, a story? It's the moments. It is the little, a student helping another student tie their shoe. It's kids working together on a project and collaborating. It's, whatever. It's happening at the sporting event, the field trip, in the classroom, out of the classroom. It's just saying, catching those moments that, parents don't get to see on a day in, day out basis, but we get to see it every day because we work in the school. We've got to bring those moments and tie those in. And those can tie into your strategic plan, and they can tie into, a lot of things. But I think they tie into students winning, students learning, students growing, staff learning and growing and accomplishing things. And we need to catch those moments, whether it's a photo, whether it's a video, okay? And then be able to get those in so that they can then be shared. But not everybody's comfortable with social media, and I get it. I don't love all things about social media. You're not necessarily going to grab everybody. But I know, Mark, after talking to you on my podcast, right from the get-go, you're like, I want you to tell the stories. And we want to be able to grab these and capture these moments and get them in and share them with more people. And you've been able to see firsthand the difference that makes. It takes less than 5 seconds to snap a picture. You got to clean off your lens, make sure the lens
have to clean off your lens. Yep.
Try to be still when you take it. All of the pictures are not going to win an award, and that's okay. It's more about catching those moments and letting people in, knowing what's happening. And so it's got to be continually talked about and trained with our staff, bringing it up. Sometimes we do contests. Say, hey, everybody who submits something this month, you're going into a drawing for a gift card to a local, restaurant or whatever we'd want. But so sometimes you got to do a little bit encouraging. But once your staff starts seeing the impact that it makes, when a parent comes in and's like, oh my gosh, I always ask my child what they did at school today and they say nothing. But now I can see that, gosh, you had this big old geography project and they were doing all of these things and making this food. And there's really great things that are happening. But if we're not sharing them, nobody knows about them. So, it can be, it's an ongoing process and it's always going to be evolving. But somebody inside needs to be that internal cheerleader. And, I am that for a lot of schools.
Sure.
To try to encourage. But then you need leadership. And that's why, MBIT is so lucky to have a leader like you that is totally sold in. And even if the leader is a little bit hesitant, you just got to understand the culture and the importance of it and have somebody in your organization that can kind of give everybody the rah-rah, know?
And I think when you get those messages from parents that say, hey, my child's in so-and-so lab, maybe you could go there next. That people are watching and they're getting real value out of it. And because social media is sort of the refrigerator of, that it was in the 80s when I grew up, you're always hoping to get that good grade or that gold star that you'd put on the fridge. Well, now we can share that post and that parent gets to share it to their networks. I was going to ask you about the social media and through the lens of perfectionism. So we've created, social media has become, and I feel like authenticity is starting to win over perfectionism. But I think some of the hesitation comes from, well, it wasn't perfect. The photo wasn't perfect. The expressions weren't perfect. The content wasn't perfect. The faces weren't perfect. All of those things. Do you think, I guess, weigh in on that and say how your experience and whether or not that matters versus the content generation? I think there's a push-pull between more is better and better is better. And so how do you feel about that?
Well, my friend Ren Lubring, she is out of the state of Missouri, and she had the quote, posted is better than perfect and unpublished. Posted is better than perfect and unpublished. So if you are working on something for hours and hours to do this perfect TikTok video and then it never gets published, that it's all wasted work, right? So I think there has been a lot of studies that show kind of less perfected, let's say videos or pictures, sometimes actually do better than that perfectly edited video with all of the B-roll and all of the things. Because like you said, people crave authentic and they don't want to be sold to. And not that we're necessarily selling as a school, but you are promoting the great things that are happening. There is an opportunity with tech schools, with public schools, with private schools. You want to attract and retain students, and you also want to attract and retain staff. Okay. So I think you can be authentic with that, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But I would say you don't want to go to the end of where I'm sharing everything, every little moment that happens, every fundraiser, because there is an algorithm on the other side of every social media platform. And if all of a sudden you're putting out 20 posts on Facebook in one day, that's too much. We usually on average are posting about 3 times a day during the week on Facebook. And sometimes up to 5, but that's, we're trying to space those out. But there is such a thing as too much. And you want to make sure that it's the right stuff. What I see a lot of schools using social media for is a bulletin board. Hey, this meeting's coming up. Hey, don't forget this deadline to order your yearbook. Hey, we've got this fundraiser coming up. Not that those are bad things. You can share them on certain platforms. And I love Instagram stories to share little reminders and things. But you want to celebrate. You want to celebrate what's actually happening and make sure that when the fundraiser does happen, that you're sharing pictures of that, because that's what's going to get more reach. And so all of your stories are going to be seen by more people. So you don't want to cloud up, I guess, your feed with a bunch of stuff that only pertains to a very super small population. For instance, if there's a baseball game that's canceled, we don't necessarily put that on our district Facebook page, right? Because that affects kind of a small group of people. We have other avenues for letting parents know when things have been canceled through the activities calendar and whatever. So you've got to have a good balance. But perfectionism isn't needed. I have made every mistake in the book when it comes to spelling errors or grammar or the wrong picture or something, and you're just like, oh my gosh. Of course, you always want to be on it and make sure that, hey, because if something's wrong, somebody's going to tell you. So that's a good thing about social media, right? So as long as you're watching your comments, you can correct it pretty easy. And all of the channels really have options that you can do. So I don't know. I babbled for a long time, Mark.
Listen, I posted a school closing. I was in charge of the website and misspelled inclement on the school website. And it took 0 minutes for me to get an email about how I had made a spelling error. And, you just fix it and move on, right?
I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I hate the word inclement, because what does that even mean? Like, we talk about why use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do. And I'm not being critical of you, Mark, because everybody kind of uses it. But it's like, we're canceling it due to poor weather or whatever. Just thinking about the understanding and the reading levels that we want to put some of that stuff out. I guess it's probably another podcast, but I just have a pet peeve about that. Now you learned something about me.
Well, there you go. And not ready. This will tie right into the next question, which is not to rely too heavily on the technology to do it for me. I assumed I didn't get the squiggly line underneath it. It was spelled correctly. Well, right. It wasn't. So as we're getting towards the end here, I wanted to talk a little bit about AI. What a fascinating, just generally speaking, we'll talk about ChatGPT as a content generation tool. I mean, I think that we've learned here that it's about prompt engineering to get the outputs you're looking for. But I'm also starting to notice patterns within AI where the content that it outputs feels less and less personal, or it's becoming more identifiable as AI. And so any words of wisdom or words of caution about using or relying on AI as part of, here's the great part. We are all tired. We want to get that third post out. We've had one banner of a day and it's 4:15 and you're trying to hit the road for your hour-long commute home and you need to do the last one. And it's great because it can give you the words, right? Sometimes we just don't have the words and we know the idea, but we can't get the idea out. But if it produces something that is robotic or inauthentic, we probably would have been better off to not post it. So any words of wisdom on using AI or avoiding AI, or when it's best used as people are looking, because social media takes time. And so AI is a great time saver and it can be a huge, huge help. But also I think we just have to be cautious. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you can use ChatGPT like you can in a lot of things. Hey, make me a Facebook post about ice cream social with our third graders and their grandparents and use emojis, okay? So it's going to throw in 52 emojis and it's going to make up like 3 paragraphs. And some of it might be usable and some of it isn't. My favorite one is make it shorter, because we want to make it more concise and using your school hashtag. But it's a tool. And I think I agree with you. I think more and more we're seeing things and we're like, oh, that was AI. They used AI. So how authentic is that? That's not authentic. So you got to be careful with the way that you use it and how often you use it and some of those things. Sometimes it really can help. I can't say, I mean, one of my favorite words is amazing. Another one of my favorite words is awesome. So it's like, okay, Andrea, you probably don't need to have the word awesome in every single one of your posts. And by the way, New Auburn School District in Little Wisconsin, that's where the school is that I manage. So if any of you want to critique a social media page, that's me behind the page. But sometimes I will use ChatGPT to help give me a few things, but I never use it as my final. I like adding emojis with it because I don't know if you know, but using emojis in your social media posts increases engagement, which is likes, comments, shares. It increases engagement by 25 to 57% because, it stands out. It's not just all text, all of that. So you want to use emojis, but you also want to balance it. And sometimes if you don't know what the emoji means, don't use it. And if it just feels like it's overload, sometimes it also adds a whole bunch of hashtags. You're like, no, that's not really relevant. So I think you have to use it carefully. I will say, like you said, prompt engineering. Hey, what should I be thinking about if I'm writing a, survey to ask our seniors what their plans are after, high school or after their CTE, program graduation. It can really do a good job of helping you pull out great questions that are going to do really well on social media. But we've just like any, technology piece, I guess we just got to use it with caution and it's always changing as well. And just a quick note, make sure you understand how your school allows you to use tools like AI, because I have known, and I know somebody that lost their job because of it, because they said it was plagiarism because they had used it to help them write something. And
Interesting.
I think, yeah, that goes a long way. And I was really surprised by that. I'm like, really? It's a tool, but just make sure that you have those conversations with your school.
Interesting. Well, I wanted to say thank you very much for your time. I feel like this is a great point to stop. I should say pause our conversation because I feel like we're going to have more conversations. I also want to say thank you. We've been really inspired by your inspiration, and it's great to have. You said in your book, you're a cheerleader. You're a natural born cheerleader, and so it's nice to have a cheerleader behind you and encouraging, and somebody who's been there before and made all the mistakes and can help us navigate some of the choppy water. And I think this might be the first podcast I've recorded, Andrea, that I'm not wearing a red tie. I knew I had our conversation today, and I see our YouTube playlist, and I'm always wearing a red tie. And I thought today is going to be that we're going to break the mold today. Actually, before we go, can we talk about podcasts real quick? Should there be more podcasts out there? What do you think about podcasts? We just started this one. I didn't know anything about it. I have the thing and I push the buttons and it records and we're doing this, and it allows me to have these conversations, but we also use it to create short form with our student interns. Can we maybe just talk for a quick 2 seconds about podcasts? You don't have to talk about red ties or blue ties, just about podcasts.
I wish it was a purple tie, of course, because purple's my color. Podcasting, I started podcasting 4 years ago when COVID hit. I've listened to podcasts for years because it's a free way to get content. A lot of people spend a lot of times in their cars working out. I think there's so many things in short form on social media where things got to be really short. Podcasting gives you a longer option, and it's just a different feel, a different audience. You can really, dive into topics a little bit deeper and not have to go so superficially like a TV news clip or something like that. I think it's very valuable. You have to, of course, evaluate what time you have to devote for it as part of your school. And I think, your listenership will grow. But I would think, Mark, if nobody listened to my podcast, I think I would still do it because I learn and grow with every conversation I have. So I believe when you have this in your school and you're making these connections. I just talked with somebody from Pennsylvania that's a principal or a superintendent, assistant superintendent. He's doing a podcast now and he's like, my listens aren't up that big, but this is causing me to have connections and relationships and identify, storylines and all of this that I wouldn't know of if I wasn't taking the time to do this. So, and I think you would agree, it's easier than you think. The tech is nowadays is not that complicated. Although, Mark, we didn't record us before this video came live.
Right.
We were struggling a little bit. But we got it. But it is definitely pretty easy to do. And you can get some students involved like you guys do. And I think it's a great medium to really consider to layer in with all of the other ways that you can communicate and ultimately connect with people.
And we do the video podcast, and what blew my mind was that Google is the number one search engine in the country, and the number two search engine, in the world, and the number two search engine in the world is YouTube.
Yeah.
And so because it functions as a search engine, it's a great way to be part of the conversation. And really, my goal was to be a voice in the career tech space. We have so many people who come through this building, tour our facility, have great things to say, have seen our students in action. And I'm sitting in my office having a conversation with them after the fact. And now several times, this is my desk. This is the desk I sit at. I say, let's just go over here and sit down and have this conversation. And because this is not made up, this is just a dialogue between two people. It really is an easy way to have that conversation and then find those threads and pull on them and see what they lead to. So I would agree with you. And I think that it's a great way. And at first you were just a name at the bottom of a book, right? And now we've done 2 recordings together because you were generous with your time and had us on yours. And now, you've been on ours. I mean, it's amazing. They say, what is it? That 95% of podcasts stop before the 7th episode. So I think I'm going to make you my 7th episode just to break the mold and have that be the way we launch after that. You were going to say something.
Well, and I'm coming up on episode 200, Mark.
Whoa.
So when you do a weekly show and you do it for 4 years, you can get to 200 as well. And I'm telling you, it's a favorite part of my job, like that I get to do, and I learn so much. So, and my daughter's just starting out in business school, and I would say for any kid, learning how to do a podcast. Oh my gosh, what amazing skills! Whatever job you're going to have someday, there's marketing that's involved. There's connections. There's just dealing with people. And she's working on it right now. So I'm really proud of her.
Well, I do really appreciate your time. And I'll go back to what I said before. I appreciate your encouragement. I appreciate your wisdom. And I appreciate your expertise. And we're glad to be associated with you and your organization. Do you want to share with folks who might be interested more information about where they can find you?
Yeah. Well, if you're listening to podcasts and you like that, Mastering Social Media for Schools, Mark and Janice were on, but also we're going to, coming up, one of your students is actually going to join us. So we're a little bit out, but this spring in 2024, we'll have that. And then you can find me on the website, socialschool4, it's the number 4, edu.com. A lot of free resources there, and just start out with that. But if I can help you at all, I want to be your cheerleader as well, because there are more stories out that are happening in schools that need to be celebrated. I
agree. And as a career tech school, I know the importance of making sure that people understand us through a modern lens rather than perhaps an outdated lens that is persistent and perpetuating over time. So telling our story is hugely important. You've been a big part of that. And I want to again say thank you. So thanks again. And I know we'll be talking again soon. So thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, keep up the great work. I love learning from what you and your students are doing. So keep it up.
Fantastic.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Ambitious is a student-produced project of Middle Bucks Institute of Technology. To find out more about MBIT, visit us at www.mbit.org.